month or recently on the critical infrastructure program. And I'm excited at the idea of infrastructure in general, bridges and rights-of-way and utility poles, and also broadband infrastructure. And I'm excited at the idea of having you all and leaders in general helping us understand broadband infrastructure and helping us understand how broadband might impact or might allow us to create chains of commands with inspector generals and general counsels and things that leaders might help us understand. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Yep.
Appreciate it. Yep. Okay, the next will be the approval of the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I have one correction to the consent agenda, I believe. Maybe not. Yes, item number 2, we have the budget amendment summary. On attachment 2, the very last line, it states that the surplus increase from $67,000 to $153,000. That was an old number. The $153,000 on that last line of attachment 2 should read $190,000.
If everyone will make that note that change, I'd appreciate it.
Also, my name is misspelled in the minutes in one spot. So
Is this in the minutes?
In the minutes of the special meeting.
Any other deletions or additions? Do I have a motion?
Of the consent agenda.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Next, item number 7, the Transportation Board due appointee. I'd like to welcome Aubrey Lane. He's going to take a couple of minutes. Aubrey, if you go on up. I want to tell you that Aubrey has stepped up after being appointed to the Commonwealth's Transportation Board. I know he's in contact with me on a regular basis, and I certainly do appreciate that. And he wanted to take a couple of minutes to address us. Aubrey, we certainly welcome you here.
Well, thanks for having me today. I will be brief because I know you have a full agenda, and I have a meeting to get to in Richmond this afternoon also. But first of all, I've met some of you. I'd give a brief, my background briefly. I'm a native and lifelong resident of Hampton Roads. Grew up in Hampton, lived the last 25 years in Virginia Beach. Undergraduate degree from the University of Richmond in accounting, and I have my MBA from Old Dominion. The last 15 years I have been employed by Great Atlantic Real Estate. I serve as the the president and principal broker. Some of you from the peninsula or maybe from the south side would recognize that. That company was founded by Edwin Joseph, Mayor Molly Joseph Ward's father. He was very instrumental in not only being my boss but my mentor. And one of the things he instilled upon me is that if I have a problem, go look in the mirror, because that's the only person that's going to fix it. So that really came to light when I was at the last meeting when a comment was made by one of our legislators that they didn't care too much about the CTB because all they did was send our money to Northern Virginia. So I don't want that to be fact nor perception. So that's one reason I want to introduce myself to you today. In that regard, I think there's a few things that we can do to work better together. One is I will offer myself both accessibility and accountability to this board. I'll be happy to meet with you as a group or individually to take your guidance as we work through transportation issues that affect this region. So I fully expect for you to hold me accountable for the decisions that I make. Now, in that regard, there's a few things that I would ask your help in. One is you've already started the process of prioritizing projects. And I would encourage you to do that because as we go through competing for scarce dollars, a concerted priority list will help us compete against other regions. I can assure you that our brothers in Northern Virginia have been doing this for a while, so I applaud your efforts in that. There are 14 members on the Commonwealth Transportation Board that are appointed by the governor. There are 3 government employees or members of that board. I would encourage you, if you've not already done so, to add them to your mailing list. and to invite them to your meetings, to keep them abreast of what's going on in this region. What I have found is that particularly with the members on the western part of the state, the impact of the ports and our roads really impact their economic conditions, and they would be interested. And the more we can do to educate them, the better I think we will be in competing for scarce dollars. Now, of the 14 members that are appointed by the governor, they are 9 district seats, which I am the district seat for the Hampton Roads region. And then we have 5 at-large members, and we have 1 at-large member here from Hampton Roads, and that's Dana Dickens. And I want to publicly thank Dana for helping me get up to speed. He's a great asset to the region. I look forward to serving with him. But I would encourage, as part of our legislative agenda, to ask the governor-elect, to consider putting another at-large member from Hampton Roads. If you look at the makeup of the board and looking at Northern Virginia, there's both Fredericksburg and the Northern Virginia District. And from those districts, there are 2 at-large members. While they have been very good to work with, our geography and our position in the state, I see no reason why we shouldn't at least be considered to have another at-large member here for more influence. Now, the other 2 constituents that we will have to make a part of our team effort is certainly our state legislators. And I would encourage, I understand that they report to this board, but I would encourage us to help them, whether it's political cover or giving them information in determining how we can find more statewide revenues. Because in addition to competing, we are going to have to find some more of these revenues, and anything that we can do to help our legislators, I would encourage that we do that, and I offer my services to those here if there's any way I can do to help in that regard. Finally, the other constituency, I see Dennis, you're sitting here. I've spent some time with him over the last few months, and I would ask us to refrain to the extent we can publicly rebuking VDOT or anybody else that's part of our group. Not because I don't think that there needs to be changes made. I would think Dennis would agree that we have a long road ahead of us. But quite frankly, it doesn't work. It leads to public apathy about transportation projects. And quite frankly, I think it diverts us from the real issues at hand, and that is finding additional revenues and competing with scarce resources. So I just ask you and encourage you, if you have a problem, let's do it in the appropriate way and not in public. I'll wrap up quickly by just telling you what's on the agenda for this afternoon at the CTB meeting. The 2 things I know you're going to discuss probably briefly in your meeting. One is the system-wide cuts that are coming with this new round of reductions. I don't have all the details. I will have them this afternoon. I don't know how we fare against other parts of the state, but I will be happy to come back and report that to you, work with you, and take your guidance as to how we want to respond as a region to those proposed cuts. Now, I know there's a December 1st public hearing. I'm sure we'll all be a part of that. And I pledge my support to listen to you as we work through this difficult time. The last item we'll be discussing, another item, but the last item I'm going to discuss today is the concept of corridors of statewide significance. That is being discussed as a way in the future that the Commonwealth Transportation Board will allocate resources. The state has identified 11 corridors around the state, 5 of which either begin or terminate here in Hampton Roads. So in terms of numerical terms, we fare pretty well in terms of that allocation, at least in getting us to an allocation. Because the theory behind that is if you are not in one of those statewide areas of significance, then the chance of getting funded for transportation dollars greatly diminishes. And I would encourage us, we as a CTB, work through what those parameters are going to be, that we somehow coordinate that with your effort on prioritization of projects so that we make sure we have a concerted effort when we go up there competing for these dollars. So I had 5 minutes. I'll briefly open it up if there's any questions of me. I thank you for allowing me to come today.
Any questions? Okay. Aubrey, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
The next TPO committee status report. Joe, I believe that's your thing, if I recall.
I guess it is. There's congestion even in the room. The TPO committee has met for something over a year, dealing with a number of issues, particularly arising out of the review by the FHWA and trying to address the issues that were raised in the programmatic recommendations and the requirements that they had us address. So we've done a number of things in meetings that went on between June 2008 and July 2009. If you look in item 8 of your package, it really outlines in pretty good detail all of the things that have been done and who's been on the committee. I would personally like to thank the committee. Those folks really did a Herculean job. They came to all of the meetings. We rarely had anybody who missed a meeting. And they really made significant contributions. And I think we got a lot done in what I think, given public processes, was a relatively short period of time. So we addressed and created, which you approved, a set of bylaws for the Transportation Planning Organization. We changed the name to that. We dealt with board membership, voting procedures, separated the TPO and the PDC. We dealt with the Structure Advisory Committee, staffing issues. We have agreements between the PDC and the MPO that you all reviewed and endorsed. We have we did a best practices study. We incorporated what we learned from areas around the country that were studied in that effort by a private firm to try and position this TPO to be more effective and efficient in the future. The thing that is really left to do is the public participation thing. We had hoped that that might be ready to have you look at on today's agenda, but as I understand it, we'll deal with that in December. And you'll have that in advance. The reason it was delayed is because when it was put out for public comment, we received a fair amount of public comment, and we want to incorporate some of those comments in the public participation document. We've dealt with now all of the required corrective actions that were required, as I said, by the FHWA in their quadrennial review. And I don't want to take your time to read or review what's in the booklet. That's all there and clear, I think, for you to see. But I would be glad to take any questions. We believe that the work of the committee is concluded, and that should there be an issue that arises that would require the committee to be re-engaged, when that arises, if it does, and when it does, the chairman can reappoint a committee, and they can then continue the work. So without taking more of your time, I think the staff work and the material in the booklet were pretty comprehensive. If anyone has any questions or comments, I'd be glad to take those.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, just one comment would be on corrective action 9 on the MPO Title VI plan. I know that is underway under Carlos's leadership, but that completion date is July of 2010. So we can't lose sight of that. That's coming up here pretty quick.
It really is. Any other questions? Joe, I want to personally thank you on behalf of everyone for your hard work here, along with the group that supported you. And this will be the conclusion of that committee at your request.
Thank you, but all of you were just absolutely terrific. I mean, we have FHWA, we had members of the board, we had VDOT, you know, it really, teamwork, Hampton Roads Transit, a whole variety of people who really worked hard to resolve issues that were often controversial, and I think great progress was made. So I appreciate all the support we had from everybody who participated. Thank you very much.
Is there a motion to conclude the TPO committee?
So moved, but in making that motion, I think that Mayor Frank's leadership really should be highlighted. We couldn't have gotten there without it.
A special thanks to everybody. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Nominating. A lot of appreciation here, Joe. Thank you. The legislative, nominating committee for Citizens Transportation Advisory Committee. Doug?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can do this fairly quickly. I think we're going to show half a dozen slides. If we're not, I can just talk from this sheet. But what I want to do is give you a quick update on where we are on the Citizen Advisory Committee and tell you a little bit of the process. And then you've heard most of this before, but I think it's also good for the public to understand what we're doing and where we are. You'll remember that the bylaws actually put forth that the nominating committee would vet the candidates and nominate candidates for the Citizen Advisory Committee. And on the 16th of September, you all authorized, or the full board authorized us to move forward with that process. You remember I told you last month that we set up from the approximately the 8th of October until the 6th of November to receive applications. And so we've received approximately 65 applications at this point in time. And statistically, it's a pretty good cross-section. And you've got, I think this is important information for you to hear, but you've got 39 white males, 41 folks from the ages of 35 to 60, 17 that are over 60. You've got regional interest groups, and I'll touch on that for a minute. That we've got 16 applications from groups representing regional interest groups, and then we've got the remaining 48 are private citizens that don't actually represent a group, but are here because they have interest. Obviously, an important consideration for moving forward is to make sure that we've got a well-balanced group demographically, geographically, and then we'll certainly work forward to bring that to you all. The bylaws actually say that we could have up to 30 members on this committee. We want to make sure that really the requirements in the bylaws are you have to be a resident of one of the member communities, and that the committee should reflect geographic diversity. Remember, we had a fair bit of conversation about that, but the guiding principles that the committee has put forward really are fairly straightforward, and that the committee should reflect a balanced socioeconomic, demographic, geographic, and interest group representation. And we said that private citizens, those that aren't representing specific interest group, should represent 2/3 of the committee. So we'd have 2/3 from just private citizens, and then up to a third that would represent groups. Our plan right now is to bring back to you at the December meeting a recommendation of that initial group. We've got the 30 members. I suspect we will nominate probably 20, give or take, which would obviously give this group a little bit of time to make sure if we didn't get it right, if we left a group out, give us a little bit of flexibility, but go ahead and get the panel stood up. And the other thing that we'll come back to you with our recommendation. You'll remember these are 3-year terms, but we wanted to stagger the initial group. So some will get an initial term of 1 year, some will get an initial term of 2, and so the remainder 3 years. So we won't have everybody rotating off at the same time. So again, we'll come back to you in December with those recommendations. I would say to you also, just so you know, the Freight Committee, which we stood up last month, is moving along well with great support from the Port Authority. We've actually got our first meeting set up for, I think, the 18th of December. Scheduling a meeting has been the biggest challenge, but we will grapple with bylaws, and have already got a draft agenda out. And if anybody has questions or wants to hear more about that, please see me offline. But with that, Mr. Chairman, happy to answer questions, but that's a quick update for you.
Senator Miller.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I heard you talk about the composition of the committee, but I'm not clear how many women are on it and how many other minority people are scheduled to be on it.
So far, 0. There is no committee yet. We have literally got the applications submitted, and that's the process that we're going through. So now we've got 64 applications, and that's what we're saying. We want to make sure we've got good diversity, good representation on that committee, but we'll come back to this group with a recommendation of who that initial what that initial membership should look like.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to signal to the committee that it should be balanced in terms of women in terms of minority representation and not to have committees that really do not reflect the composition of Virginia. This area needs to be reflected in terms of the kinds of people we have in this area. It should not be monolithic. And I need to say that up front so that when I start asking questions later, you'll be clear.
Sure. Excellent point. And that's also part of why we're not going to go with the full 30 membership, because we want to make sure we give ourselves some flexibility of 6 to 10 slots that allow us to correct any deficiencies there, Senator.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your hard work on this. The Legislative Ad Hoc Committee Progress Report.
Mr. Chairman, we have in your agenda packet on item number 10 a recommended list for this Legislative Ad Hoc Committee. We'd like to get the board's approval and have you as chairman to direct this committee convene and begin preparation for the 2010 session of the General Assembly.
Right, and let me say that everyone has been contacted and has agreed to serve this here. So is there a motion?
Yes, so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you very much.
11.
Number 11, HRTPO Project Prioritization and Selection Process Update.
We'll have, Mr. Chairman, representatives from, again, from Kimley Horn Associates here to give you the latest on the test bed methodology.
Thank you. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you. Again, I'm Carl Tewksbury, Kimley Horn. Also with me is Karen McPherson. I'll go through this briefly. I just really want to give you a project update, but we're going to really focus on the revised weighting factors, the tool that we've developed, and then those results of just the test bed projects for all 6 categories. 6-month project, as you've seen before, or nearing the end, if you will. We're in that stage where we're developing the tool, refining the tool. The tool, quite frankly, has pretty much been developed. It's just going through some minor modifications, but as you'll see later, it's intended to be adapted for use and modification as other projects are added. We're also working on the documentation of the methodology that not only documents the methodology but the process to date. The weighting factors started with a survey to both the public and technical realms, if you will, and then went through the steering committee into the preliminary stage and got tested and bounced around there and got juggled a little bit with the steering committee, who's made up from the TTAC. And we went back and forth and got initial endorsement on the process and where we were going with the weightings. And that's, quite frankly, that's going to continue to change, we see, as priorities shift. But that's the nice part about the tool. It does allow these weighting factors to be broken up a little bit differently. But what I'd like to do is just go briefly through these 6 categories and to talk to some of the changes that were made in the weighting factors since you had last seen them. And overall, in several of these categories, about 75% of the weighting is going towards that more technical score, if you will, that's less subjective, but now 25% is being divided up between economic vitality and project viability, and that was a reaction from the steering committee and from TTAC and from others to give those two a little more weight, if you will. So if we're looking at highways, we've redistributed some of the numbers, reduced congestion level a little bit, system continuity, taken some points away there, and added to economic vitality, so we're giving it more weight. So what you see over to the far right, that column, is the redistribution of that weighting. And very similarly with the bridges and tunnels, we did the same. We reduced the congestion and the system continuity by 5 points each and added those 10 points over to economic vitality. So again, between economic vitality and the viability, it has more weighting there, if you will, than previously.
Mr. Chairman?
Please.
I'm looking at these, and is there a, I mean, some of these are pretty self-explanatory, like congestion level and so forth, but economic vitality, is there anywhere where we can find a definition of what that, I mean, 'cause that could mean something to many different people?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. There's a lot of conversation at the steering committee level and certainly with TTAC about that, exactly what that is. And we continue to bounce around what exactly that is and try to get our arms around it. It does mean a lot of different things to different people, and quite frankly, I don't know that we'll all necessarily have the same answer ultimately, but hopefully we can come to some consensus on what it is. But we're really trying to value a project as far as what it will gain us from an economic standpoint. Is it going to bring jobs? Is the lack of that project likely to have an impact on jobs? Obviously, a new highway link that would serve a manufacturing plant would hopefully get a higher score. If a tunnel weren't reconstructed, I think it would obviously put a pinch on this area. So, yes, to answer your question, we're going to work on a clear definition of that.
Thank you.
The bike and ped, just a little reallocation from what we had before. We took away the air quality. You'd seen that last time. We took the 5 points away there and put that over on a project viability. But that particular category does not have any economic vitality associated with it. Under the systems management, TDM, and operational improvements, really what we've done is we've reallocated under the sub-criteria, under project viability, we've reallocated those 5 points a little bit, so it's just a minor shift, giving a little more weighting to the additional funding and project readiness. Over on transit, pretty much the same thing where we reallocated under the project viability, again giving more weighting to the additional funding and project readiness. And intermodal, where we did take some points away from, and again, this was through the steering committee as well. This isn't just Kimberly Horn doing this, but reduce the cost effectiveness by 5, and economic vitality was increased by 5, again, to give it a little bit more look, if you will. Then under project viability, readjusted some of those numbers again to give more to additional funding and project readiness. That's the weighting, and again, it can certainly change as we go, and we've developed this tool, which is a very high-powered Excel spreadsheet, and I won't bore you with the details of it, but it's very convenient, user-friendly, and pretty simple to use, and it does allow numbers, if you will, weightings, or the measures of effectiveness to be changed pretty quickly. But it's because it's a database, it allows the information to be sorted in almost any manner you could think. We put the tool to test with the test bed projects. And the reason we did that, first off, you've seen the 42 test bed projects. What we wanted to accomplish with putting those test bed projects in is capture a minimum number of projects per each category, but to see if the technical data, if that was available. That was the first test. And then to see if the weighting factors were appropriate in the MOEs, and quite frankly, that's why we're coming back with some adjustments to the weighting factors. We run it through the test bed, or the tool, I should say, and things did look a little bit out of balance, so we did modify it. We wanted to see if there was ability through the tool to really differentiate between some projects, and you'll see in some cases that's true. In other cases, they're very close to one another. And to see if the tool is giving reasonable results that we can all say on a consensus basis, this does make sense. And then identify any areas that need to be refined. A couple key points to remember, though, and we're going to show you some results here in a minute on the test bed projects. This is just a sampling of the projects. There's about 200 projects that are out there. So we agreed that we'd take this tool, load it with some test bed projects just to get an idea of what that scoring would look like. It's a technical score. It has a numerical grade, if you will, to it. And the tool's only looking at projects within the same category. In other words, we're not looking at bridges and tunnels and comparing those to bike and ped projects. They're only to be compared within each category. And again, it just said it again, 43 projects are in here, not the full long-range transportation plan. The tool is getting pretty close to being somewhat in its final stage, if you will. I believe once we get all the projects in there, that there'll be more modifications to the tool, but we're feeling pretty comfortable with the tool overall. So here are the results by category. And what we've done is, what you see in the red and the green and the white, we've created tiers, if you will, and that's just to help break out, I guess, the top third, middle third, and bottom third, if you will, or the different tiers there. But you can see in the top how close some of those fall to one another under highway, and in the middle tier, the group, and obviously the bottom tier. But that is the technical score from this tool, and the rank, how that would fall out. Now, just as a side note, this tool allows us to rank by sub-criteria, or let me back up. This tool allows us to rank by criteria under highway. So we could pull up highway and we could see what are the highest projects based on congestion, what are the highest based on economic vitality, and so on. So we can break those out by criteria as well. We just wanted to give you the overall result. Here's the draft results for the bridges and tunnels, showing that the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel at the top, Midtown Tunnel second, closely followed by Dominion Boulevard, and again by tier. And you should have all this information in front of you as well. The 4 bike and ped projects, we really only broke into just 2 tiers, clear separation with what's on top towards the bottom. But the systems management and operational improvements, the 5 projects fall out. It's very clear, again, based on the scoring, that the 64 ITS replacement of variable message signs is clearly ranked at the top there, again, just based on what's in the test bed. Transit, the Naval Base Fixed Guideway Extension, falling out at the top. The 3 projects that we had in the intermodal are shown here with just the 2 tiers with the intermodal connector and the Chambers interchange at the top. That's the results of, again, we want to just brief you on is the weighting factors, the tools, and the results. So moving forward, what we would really like is just an endorsement of where we are with the process to date, and the methodology and the analysis. We are working on that report, if you will, to document the process. And we'll be completing a risk assessment, which juggles some projects around. And at this point, we're just looking for your motion to move us forward.
Any questions? Senator Miller?
Thank you, sir. Is any of your criteria taken into account the need to evacuate people during a nor'easter or hurricane?
Yeah, there is actually a criteria in there for incident management and evacuation.
It's under, I believe it's under safety and security. If
Right.
if a facility is designated as an incident management or an emergency evacuation route, it receives a higher score than those that are not.
Sure. Any other questions?
How are we ultimately going to determine between the categories which is the highest ranked project?
Great question.
It is a great question, and I think that that's really part of the next steps beyond this tool, because what you will get from this tool is a ranking within each category. Now the question is, with those 6 laid out next to each other, what is the number 1 project, number 2, and so on, is what you're asking, right?
Right, which is what we're trying to get to.
Right.
Mr. Chairman,
Maybe
maybe I can shed a little light on this. We've had some experience in the last 15 years with the 30 to 50 million per year on regional STP monies and CMAQ monies. I think what you'll find is where you have funding sources that have to go to certain categories, then you'll stay within that category for those funds. You will probably have some opportunities to flex monies across categories. At that point, the board needs to understand that you'll be in a position to set a policy of directing flex money, as we did with RSTP and CMAQ, as a certain percentage, say, to transit, as we did with the RSTP and CMAQ, or to bikeways, as an example. Or you could do the same thing to a safety project. So you have flexibility to cross those boundaries where the funding allows you the flexibility. But where not, then you're going to have to stay in that category.
Any other questions?
Maybe a comment. I think this is some really good work has gone on, and I'm appreciative of it. I feel a little bit uneasy. The only uneasiness is I came in today after some conversations with some folks thinking that this economic vitality piece, I'm kind of like Glenn, I don't quite understand what it is, but that it needed to have a bigger number relative to highways, bridges, and tunnels. It's gotten that bigger number. Is it the right number? I came in thinking 20 as opposed to 15. Maybe 15 is right, but I want to just say what I heard, which is this thing's coming before us, but it's a little bit of a work in progress. There may be further revisions, and so because I'm a little bit nervous that this thing goes out, and now it's accepted, and now we grade things, and answers come back, and then we're seeing us changing them later to sort of fit our what we perceived as a political agenda, candidly. And so I want to just get people, maybe Dwight in particular, to nod that yeah, this is not etched in stone. It's really important. We're moving it forward today, but we've left the door open to revise it a little bit if we feel like we need to.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Michael?
I wondered how in the highways weighting categories, air quality could be reduced to a 0. That's one question. And then I believe what I heard in Dwight's answer was that the tool itself would not be used to make decisions, or could not be used to make decisions across the 6 categories.
I would recommend against doing that. Yes,
Say
I think
that again?
the consultant has warned not to do that, and I would support the consultant's recommendation to not use a scoring in one category to judge a project in another category.
Oh, well,
In different ways.
and I agree with that wholeheartedly, but what I'm saying is that it sounded like to me that there was no analytical process by which the political decision makers could make those decisions across the 6 categories.
Our experience with the last 15 years with RSTP and CMAQ was that it was not an analytical process, more of a subjective, policy-oriented process of deciding how you might want to invest whatever funds that become available in whatever modes you'd like to invest in. And then we do a follow-up. We have done with the RSTP and CMAQ. We did do some follow-up performance evaluations to see if, in fact, you got what you thought you were going to get. In some cases, we found we didn't, and we immediately changed where we were allocating money. And you'll have that ability to do that also.
Paul?
Yeah, and I appreciate the work that's gone into this. I'm a little uncomfortable with what we're being asked to do, which is sort of vote on signing off on where you are to date. I mean, I'm glad to receive it for information so we can study it, but to somehow look like we're putting our stamp of approval on something that's just been, that we haven't had a chance to really diagnose, at least in my, I'll just give you one example here. For weighting factors for from bridges and tunnels, you've got, 5 points for project viability. 5 points. And so what happens is the Midtown Tunnel, which, already has a proposal, a public-private proposal in, that a panel has been put in place, that they're actually talking about what a toll might be. On your weighting factor, because the viability is what it is, it falls to number 2, and the bridge tunnel, and I'm not going to get into a debate about that now, but that is, as we sit here today, it's not viable. I mean, there's no, because we don't even know whether you're talking about a bridge or a tunnel, or what other people might think about that, including the Navy. But the viability issue, on any rating where the Midtown Tunnel, which is the only project that I'm aware of the whole region that is prepared to move forward, falls to, to a second category. I mean, what are you going to do with this when it's done?
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Mayor Frame, I'm going to touch into some an issue that I feel strongly about, but I don't want it to sound like I'm not getting my way. I think we had a discussion. Jack Tuttle, I think, brought it up before. My personal recommendation, which was not endorsed by the TTAC, my personal recommendation would be for project viability or fundability would be something akin to an on-off switch. If the project is fundable and is viable, then it stays active and on the list. If it's not, if it doesn't appear, we've crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's, and we're not there for fundability, then I think it ought to be set aside, maybe to the back burner, or at least pulled off the front burner until we can make the project fundable.
Take them all?
Or, well, that could be. Well, but the scoring, the technical scoring should stand on its own. That is, if it's a great project and it may not have the funds, then we can distinguish it's not fundable, but it's a great project.
So under your, I mean, you would take viability out of consideration altogether?
Out of the scoring here and just say it's an on-off switch. It's ready, it's not, it needs more work, but that the scoring would stand on its own merits from a technical analysis. And it's a little more complicated than that, but I think mixing those two is really apples and kumquats. I don't know how you mix those. I know the TTAC and the consultant has done what they think is best in trying to bring those into, and I think the TTAC has discussed it a couple of times and has recommended that you bring that into the scoring. But I'm just being upfront with you. My recommendation would have been more along the kin, I think, of what Mr. Tuttle brought up a month or so ago.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, just a comment. I think as we have divergent opinions and divergent backgrounds and different objectives in some cases, and we all want to coalesce around something, I think this is a tool that can come to this group that the other judgment factors can be applied. But we need a point of departure that while some of the issues on here may be somewhat debatable, whether they're subject, vehicle miles traveled, we can get a number. That one's easy. The other ones, there are some squishy numbers in here, or some topics. But we all need something that is more quantitative that we can then debate and have a point of departure. And while I respect what everybody's saying here, but if we're going to debate all of these criteria, that puts us back in the position where we were before we commissioned this project. So I just kind of say, I think we ought to move this forward, and then we can have the debate.
Glenn?
Yeah, this is why I think college football ought to have a playoff. You know, let's just take the top 8 teams in the country and let's go have a playoff. And I think that that's what this list does. Now, I think we could debate this list and what the definition of economic vitality and whether or not the project's ready and so forth all the time. I'm excited to see the fact that we are actually getting projects into the playoffs. And I think that we as a group and a body, you know, I mean, Mayor Frame's made an excellent point. I mean, you got the one project that's actually ready to go is coming in at number 2 in this kind of this mock draft right here. Well, I think it's readily apparent to all of us that if that project's ready to go and it's as high as a 2 or a 3, then for heaven's sakes, let's do it. Yeah. And so that's, you know, I'm excited about this. I mean, I think we're getting these projects into a point where we can really focus on them. And if we've got a project that's a number 1 that's not ready, because we don't know whether the Navy likes it or doesn't like it, or whether it's a bridge or a tunnel or whatever, then let's go focus on it. And let's try and get that project healthy enough to be ready for the playoffs. So I'm kind of excited about it. My question to the group, and maybe Dwight can answer this, is that the region is really focusing on this prioritization, which is exactly where we should be. But we kind of have 2 trains that have left the station, and one of them is the one that we're all aware of that we're talking about right here, and the other one is what we in the legislature refer to as the Chris Jones study, or it's HJ 164 or something. Anyway, but it's the VMAS study that is doing some research into, you know, what does a computer say, you know, would be the number 1 project in the region. And so is there any point where those 2 get compared, or will they always stay separate?
Delegate, I think they're very comparable. I have worked with you folks and with the VMAS folks, and our staff has worked very closely with them. I really see them actually as 1 train leaving the station, in using your characterization. What I told Mike Robinson and John Sokolowski and the team is I think that the value that they bring, that the team that sits behind me does not have in-house, is the ability to visually communicate the results of all this technical analysis. I think that where VMAS is going to be a wonderful asset is to be able to come to this group and to the General Assembly members and show them visually the implications of building and not building some of these projects. Otherwise, I think you're going to see them essentially being the same train.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I would have a comment, which is, pretty much share Mayor Freeman's point of view. And for us to vote on this would, at this point, at least give the appearance that these projects have been accepted in that kind of order of priority. I see no harm, unless somebody can tell me otherwise, why we can't defer a specific vote. We've heard the presentation. I think the consensus is that work is good and it's valuable, and it's going to give us a product that we can debate and deliberate in time. So I think we can just let the consultants continue to do their work without taking a vote that might suggest to the public that we've approved this slate. So I'm inclined, unless there's objection, I don't want to make a motion to table it unless there's consensus to do it. But my sense would be, table it till January or whenever they think they're going to be able to come back with a final kind of thing and move on.
And the only comment I would have to that is, I think the consultants are looking for some guidance from the board to find out if we're okay with the methodology, and so they can move forward with the next
Well,
step.
I think there's been plenty of discussion about that. I haven't heard anybody debate the methodology. I think there's some discussion about whether the criteria are fairly weighted and whether there might be some adjustment in the weighting, given the fact that, as an example, the Midtown Tunnel project is farther along than perhaps any of the other projects we've identified, and yet it comes in second. But, the criteria are the criteria. They've evaluated a set of values and reached some conclusions, which I think give you a more valid basis for discussion and consideration here than we've had historically. So I, for one, think that what they're doing is good, and, we're not bound by it. I just think that to vote on it today, that it's still it's a work in progress, so to speak. I think go back and take into account what's been said and come back to us without us blessing the outcome at this point.
Linda, then,
Yes, I was just going to say, with all due respect, I disagree. To me, this is quantitative, it's well done. It's not endorsing any projects. It's simply showing a database that we work with. I agree with Mr. Hewer. We have to start somewhere. And, it's always going to be somewhat politics, but we were trying to take it out of there. And that's what we were trying to do with this. So, I would move that we would adopt this. And we move on, and then we can go forward. This is not picking projects. This is giving us a database to work with.
I've got a motion to have a second, then we'll have discussion. Okay, now we'll discuss dinner.
Mr. Chairman, just point of reference is we need to move this forward to say when we put the 200-plus projects in there, I think you're going to see a different result. We just picked some, as the consultant did with the team, to do. Does this have a semblance of reality of what people's perceptions are?
If you had said that in the beginning, then, my blood pressure would be lower. But we have talked, the whole reason we have entered into this process, Mr. Chairman, is, a couple of people said, we need to get something built. And the Midtown Tunnel is ready to be built. It's the only project and you have a scoring test here that to the public, if they pick this up, will look at it, will look like that, that it's, it's not the highest priority. It's not viability. If we all agree that this is simply a tool, and that this is, okay, we got a methodology, and here's what popped up the first time we dumped 30 or 40 projects in it, and we're going to do this later, then I'm okay with that.
I think that's what I'm hearing, Mayor. I really do.
Well, but sometimes the printed word, when it comes out like that, without all of those explanations, turns out to be what looks like everybody accepted. And I've been down that road a couple of times.
Any other questions or comments?
I don't want to make fun of the vote, but I want to just concur and allude to the fact what Mayor Frame was talking about, but what I do want to make known is, when you say it's the only project,
I'm sorry, okay.
there are other projects. I can certainly say one in our city. I know you have one coming out there in Suffolk as well that is ready, I believe. You applied for a Tiger grant. So there are many projects that are certainly ready, and I don't want anyone to think that it's just one. But we all know the importance of all these projects, and I believe this is a tool, and if what Dennis said maybe earlier would help the blood pressure of our mayor, I'd feel more comfortable then.
I was just going to add, one possibility is to take the project viability and score that. It's not a simple yes, no. It actually has gradations. So without changing anything in this methodology, breaking that out and coming with a utility score and a project viability score, to bring that back, you put them together. If you're high on utility and high on viability, now you've got a project.
Well, Mayor Johnson, you've made the motion. Is there any reason to include in that these test bed results? I mean, can we just confirm the methodology? Is that enough for what you got?
That's all we're asking.
That's all we're
I'm perfectly happy with that.
Okay, then throw these last few pages away, will you?
All right, is that a change to your motion?
No, I think it's, I mean, we're approving the methodology.
Methodology, gotcha. All right, we got a motion and a second. Any other comments or
Does
questions?
that mean we're approving what is in the current weighting column? Is that?
We're approving just the methodology that's gone on to get to this point. This is a mock thing they just
But
put
we're
in.
not saying that the vitality quantity that they've assigned is the right number.
Absolutely not, because we've got more projects to go in. This is purely a methodology.
If that's the case,
Everything will change as the
All right, well then we won't have a roll call. Any other discussion or comments? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposition? Hearing none, we move on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would really ask that if we would see something like this in advance of the meeting, because when this is handed out in the meeting, nobody can sit here and analyze what these new weighting factors are. We can't figure it out, and that leads to this kind of discussion.
Thank you very much. It's a
Could
great
I
call.
agree with that, please?
Yeah.
I mean, we're doing important stuff here. I mean, this, and some of these, projects have been debated for years and years and years. And if you're going to, sit here and ask us to take action on it, and I didn't know we were going to be asked to take action on it today. I don't want to slow it down. God knows this thing's moving ahead, but we ought to at least be able to have the information before you.
I'm in total agreement with what you both said. Okay. The next thing is the 2030 long-range transportation plan, evaluation of impacts of amending the plan. Dwight?
We have, Mr. Chairman, we have two brief presentations. The first, your request was an update on the revenue estimates that we have been working with for the past few years, and we'll follow that with a summary of what it takes to go through either the amendment process or the plan update process. So our chief economist, Greg Rudendorf, is here to do the revenue stream update.
Morning. I was asked to talk a little bit about regional transportation revenues today. The discussion on transportation revenue strategies has been the direct result of the ongoing search to find viable funding sources for many of the region's transportation projects. During the search for funding, the PEDC and the TPO are often asked to run various scenarios to provide kind of a rough estimate of potential estimates. The purpose of these estimates is simply an educational tool designed to provide some idea as to the approximate revenue that would be generated under various revenue scenarios. If you recall, 7 years ago this month, 62% of voters in Hampton Roads voted against a 1% sales tax to fund transportation project. House Bill 3202 emerged 5 years later as a result of the search for a more palatable funding structure. If you recall, the revenues approved by the General Assembly in 2007 were as follows. There were seven funding revenues, a $10 automobile inspection fee, $5 tax on automobile repairs, a grantor's tax of 40 cents per $100 of value, motor vehicle rental tax of 2%, one-time registration fee of 1%, an annual vehicle registration fee of $10, and a 2% tax on motor fuel sales. In early 2008, revenues from the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority were deemed unconstitutional and effectively killed the HRTA revenues. Following the list of HRTA revenues, it was quite evident that the discussion on tax policy should really begin with the discussion on what is good tax policy. What you have before you here is from the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, stating that there are actually principles on good tax policy. As I move forward, I want to throw out this disclaimer here. The following revenues that we are putting forward, I want to be clear that the PDC, TPO are not advocating for the imposition of the following revenues, taxes, and/or fees. The following figures are basically rough estimates for FY010. They do not include the administrative costs or even the elasticity in demand that would align with these the revenue estimates. And finally, the figures are based on the 16 jurisdictions that comprise Hampton Roads, for the simple reason that it's much easier to pull localities, jurisdictions out rather than add them later. So these include Franklin, Southampton, Surrey, and all of Gloucester.
Mr. Chairman, forgive me for interrupting, but, you know, old habits fall hard, but PDC doesn't have a thing to do with this. You know, it's a TPO issue. And so, you know, it seems to me in our effort to separate the two, we need to separate the two.
In this case, we use the PDC staff to do the estimate.
I understand that, but that doesn't have to do with the decision policy, which is here.
Right.
Thank you for your point.
The potential revenues are as follows, and I should state at the outset that these potential transportation revenues, the reason we have this list is simply because these were quite often the most requested numbers that we ran, and the majority of these were included in HB 3202. Local income tax of 0.5% would generate roughly $130 million. Local sales and use tax of 1% would generate roughly $190 million. Recordation tax of 10 cents per $100 would generate roughly $25 million. Building permit tax of 1 cent per $100 of value would generate $100,000. A flat permit fee of $50 would generate roughly $300,000. A vehicle registration fee of $10 would generate roughly $15 million. A 1% motor vehicle sales and use tax would generate almost $37 million. 1% hotel, motel, and room tax would generate just over $7 million. Dedication of 5% of lottery ticket sales would generate roughly $17 million. A port charge of $10 per container would generate roughly $12 million. 5 cent per gallon tax on motor fuels would be $43 million. A 1% retail tax on motor fuel sales would be just over $20 million. A car rental tax of 1% would be $1.7 million. Real estate tax of 1 cent per $100 of value would be $16.4 million. A $10 automobile inspection fee would be just under $13 million. And finally, a grand tourist tax of 40 cents per $100 of value would be just short of $42 million. Again, these are just rough estimates. Potential for further analysis, certainly, as we've done in the past, we can look at the revenue raised per capita, expected cost per household, per Hampton Roads household. An example, a room tax would fall differently on Hampton Roads residents than a gas tax, so that could be substantially different. That would be percent of revenue generated by non-residents. We could also look at revenue forecasts, how these revenues would change as we move forward, and of course any other ideas that you would all have in terms of what we could look at in terms of revenue. If there are specific revenues that you would like for us to look at, then we can do much more in-depth analysis as to those particular revenues. That concludes my formal remarks. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions?
Just one. Could I?
Please.
Mr. Chairman. Greg, I don't know if you know this, but are you, well, anyway, could you explore what Northern Virginia has a revenue source there of an additional, is it a sales tax on gasoline that some localities have?
They have a gas tax,
it's
yes.
2%?
No, Mr. Mayor, it's a 2.5% gasoline tax. And originally established when Washington Metro was formed as a tri-jurisdictional agency, including Maryland and the District of Columbia. And it was eventually extended to transportation districts contiguous to the Northern Virginia Transportation District. And I'd say 2.5% gasoline tax, not at 2%, not at 2 cents, but 2.5%.
2.5%.
Yes.
Only
Mr.
on
Chairman,
fuel.
it is a sales tax on gasoline.
On fuel.
On fuel.
Yes.
Yes.
It's
I mean,
regulated.
could we extrapolate what that would give us here if we were to, seems to me if Northern Virginia has that tool, and if we might, if the General Assembly has given that tool to localities in Northern Virginia, then that might be something we could ask for here without just trying to treat everybody equally. And I don't know if that's just dedicated to transit.
Mr. Frank,
90
there is
million
there
is
is
just-
there's a number here that you can easily extrapolate.
Yeah.
Greg's got the 1%
If you look
Right.
at,
for 20.
So it is, okay, so it's 90 million.
and that 1% retail taxes is what they have in Northern Virginia.
I'm sorry, one,
Well,
what,
on here, if you look where the arrow is, the 1% retail tax on motor fuels is what they have. They have a 2.5% tax, so if you wanted just to extrapolate from that.
You'd be in a
you'd be
$50
looking
million
at roughly 50 million.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
Quick comment or question. We appreciate the analysis. I'm just wondering, with regards to transportation, I guess this would be looked at as revenues generated dealing with capital project roads, bridges, whatever. But on the public transit issue, I know this has been talked about in the past, with the method that we use to fund our public transit in the region, while it's generated by localities putting forth funding their own routes per locality, as opposed to some comprehensive way of dealing with funding for public transit as well. So I think it's something that we have to be considering as well as we do this analysis for raising revenue. Transportation routes in the region don't happen in those localities alone. Those routes cross over into other localities, thus making a full route, a full network throughout the region. So it's something I think that we need to, and I've heard others mention this in the past, so I just recommend that we not let that slip away from us as we're talking about potential ways to come up with revenue, but we don't just shoot for specifically road and bridges, but also understand that issue is still hanging out.
is that just for transit?
Thank you very much for the thought and comment. Did you want to?
Mr. Chairman, this would be a great task for the legislative task force. This would be I thought maybe Mr. Towns might want to jump in here, but I think, Cliff, you make a good point that we have not had a dedicated public transit revenue stream. Could make an enormous difference. These are labeled transportation. We didn't say highway or transit here. These are just to give you scales of magnitude for revenue streams, and then we could have that task force. If the TPO would like to develop a position on that, task force should be the ones to take an initial hit on that.
Is there any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Over here.
I'm sorry.
Several years ago, one of the things that we tried to do was a transportation referendum here, and I think it was a 1 cent sales tax increase is what we were asking the citizens to vote on. And the numbers that I recall were that we were trying to generate $275 million a year for transportation in Hampton roads. And I thought that the 1 cent, at that time, the 1 cent sales tax referendum was supposed to generate that much. So I guess, okay, so it wasn't.
That wouldn't generate quite that much.
Quite much. Is the $275 million a year, is that still the nut we're trying to crack?
I believe that number's crept upwards. That was the number that was put on the table as necessary to do all of the 6 HRTA projects.
Okay.
The legislative process at the General Assembly made a decision that you couldn't put that much money on the table, and I believe we were poised to have $150 million per year And I think Delegate Wardrop's bill in House Bill 3202 reduced quite a bit from that package by having 2 phases for the third crossing. But we were left with working at the $150 million. I've never said this publicly, but I guess it's time to say that. To my knowledge, the $150 million revenue stream was never tested, given a rigorous test against what was left in that package. So I don't have an answer to whether the $150 million would in fact crack the nut that it was supposed to crack.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? We don't need action. You're coming back in December, is my understanding through reading this. Or do you need action?
This is just for information purposes.
Okay, right.
We have it as part 2, but on the long-range plan, but this was just to respond to the question of could you update the revenue stream?
Thank
So
you.
it's really a document for future reference.
The next is regional high-speed and intercity passenger rail.
No, we have a part B to this one.
Oh, part B.
Long-range plan amendment.
Let's get a part B.
Good morning.
Morning.
Continuing on the topic of potential amendments to the 2030 plan, I'll walk you through a very broad overview of what would need to be done to accomplish that. Following the Virginia Supreme Court's decision about HB 3202, we received guidance from Federal Highway in March of 2009, and I just pulled out a couple parts of that guidance for you today. It states that the HRTA funds are no longer reasonably expected to be available, and however, the other revenue estimates in the 2030 plan would not be required to be updated. And likewise, the cost estimates in the plan would not need to be updated. So those are some of the parameters that we have to deal with if we should amend the 2030 plan. Very broad overview of what would need to be done. We have to reconsider the fiscally constrained project list contained in the 2030 plan. That would be followed by conducting air quality conformity. And finally, that conformity document would be reviewed and approved by federal agencies. As I stated, HRTA funds were deemed to be no longer reasonably expected to be available, and it would impact the following projects in the 2030 plan: the I-64 South Side, Third Crossing, I-64 Peninsula, Midtown Tunnel MLK Extension, Southeastern Parkway, Dominion Boulevard, and Route 460. And the funding assumptions would need to be reconsidered in developing that revised project list. Air quality conformity is required for this process. It requires about 4 to 5 months. A question that often gets asked when we bring up air quality conformity is whether we'll pass. The most recent air quality conformity analysis, we passed by a pretty sizable margin of ranging from 11% to 39%. So that gives us reasonable expectation of passing. Federal review and approval, there's 45 days for Federal Highway and FDA to review the conformity document, and this is really the final step. Federal conformity finding is the final step in the amendment process. Our current efforts, as we just heard from Kinley Horn, the project prioritization, their report is due to us next month. I should clarify, within that prioritization process, at the outset of that process, we included projects that had been mentioned to us as being desired for inclusion if we should amend the 2030 plan. However, right now we asked TTAC again to provide that information to us to be sure we have just a handle on the quantity and background of all the potential projects. And also work on our 2034 plan continues. You may have heard at the last presentation talk of 200 projects. Just to clarify, that is in relation to candidate projects for our 2034 plan, which we are currently working on. And the final draft of that process should be approved by the TPO by summer 2011. And with that, I will take any questions.
Any questions or comments? I believe there's action to direct the TAC to convene to review the 2030 LRTP amendment process. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Well, thank you very much. We'll now go to the regional high-speed and intercity passenger rail. Dwight,
Mr. Chairman, we have actually again here a Part A and a Part B here. The Part A is to have you folks authorize me to issue the request for proposals, which is in your packet. I can certainly entertain any questions about what it is we're asking. The first attachment here is a resolution from last month's meeting. The next is the cover letter for that RFP, and then you can see the details for this. I have set a budget for about $50,000 per year. We'll start with that for this fiscal year. We could extend this contract, in my mind, 3 to 5 more years, 1 year at a time, depending on how things go, how successful we are, or how unsuccessful we are as to whether we need these consultant services. I think the centerpiece for this proposal is to have a national expert position us to have advantage when we go after federal and state monies. I think that's probably the most important piece. There are some discussions here about having them weigh in on a service development plan for high-speed rail and intercity passenger rail. I think, Mr. Chairman, we could talk about whether or not we can use them for advice on some other areas regarding setting up advisory committees and so forth. But I think we really want to look for somebody who can come in here and tell us how we stack up as we work our way through this process against our national competitors.
There's a piece I think that's missing, if I might suggest it. If you look on the request for proposals on page 2, attachment 13A, the second bullet, it does what Dwight suggests. It asks if we are appropriately positioned. Seems to me that we need to add something to the effect, and if we're not, how do we position ourselves so that we are, appropriately positioned? It's the other side of it.
Get that?
That's what I assumed they would do. So that's a great point.
Very good. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Please.
Dwight, do you have the sense that $50,000 will get the person we want?
That's what's on the back of my mind, too.
Well, that's per year. That brings up another issue about budget. I've added 2 high-end positions, and I've had a best practice. I've had this consultant work, which was done, obviously, at Dennis's and Pierce's expense, and then this new item, and we've had some new public participation items that are going to really hit on us. So I've gone conservative. I'm not sure if $50,000 will do this. It could very well in the first year exceed $100,000. It's a starting point. We've put it out there as a target. When we do the RFP and the interviews, if they come back and say, Mr. Farmer, it's not near enough, then I'll come back to the board and ask for approval of it.
My only concern is the guy you want may look at the $50,000 and say, I'm not even going to propose, right?
That is a distinct possibility.
I don't know what my sense is that you're going to need to put more money in the proposal if you want the guy that I think whoever proposed this once, that if they get the right person.
Do you have to put an amount in there?
You don't have to put an amount in the proposal. You can, for professional services, you can ask for the scope and then negotiate the price after you choose.
Why don't we do that?
Because you can't choose on that, and then we'll see where it goes, and we can negotiate and it comes out.
Why don't we do that?
Yes.
Do I have a motion to move forward for the RFP?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition? As far as the appointment to this task force, I believe that I really think I'd like to get some input from the consultant, to be honest with you, and get some thoughts there as to how it should be set up. I have talked with the vice chairman, and we might set up some subcommittees. I think it'd be chaired by the TPO chairman, but I do want some input from the consultant as we move forward. But I do think we'll have subcommittees, and I've asked Molly Ward and Paul Frame to help out along those lines if we do that. Okay. Next. Okay, great to see you. The fiscal year 2010 through 2015 six-year improvement program revision update.
Well, what we have here for you is, and some events have occurred actually since we put this agenda out. We had received word and received a briefing from Ms. Rita Busher, who is the Chief Financial Officer from VDOT, on the financial state and the need for further cuts in the six-year improvement program. She came down to the TTAC and gave a fairly extensive briefing. There were still probably more questions that we had than answers. Since that time, I believe in the last couple of days, Dennis, VDOT has drafted now a set of tables with some cuts. I have not had remotely enough time to go through and look through
That
those.
should be posted this afternoon after the CTB workshop on our website.
Yeah, we've caught wind of some of those. Maybe it's not appropriate for me to enter into any discussions now until it becomes officially posted, but there are some severe cuts statewide. There are some severe cuts, relatively speaking, within the region. We have, in this particular agenda packet, as directed by VDOT, put together a call to each locality to give us a list of projects that each locality deems to be critically important. So today, we're asking for you to approve the resolution which submits that list of critically important projects and further request that VDOT not cut any funding to those particular projects on the list in this agenda packet.
Any questions or comments? I got a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
I'd like to note an abstention.
So noted. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Thank you very much. Is there any old or new business?
Did we cover the February?
Yes, we did. I thank you all very much for your...
Mr. Chairman, one other thing. Mr. Farmer handed out a handout on the Berkeley Bridge lift.
Yes.
If I could draw your attention to that, also sent out an email. I think it covered all of you, plus many of the chamber members in the area. It's been, informal feedback says that everybody in the region seems to like on the scheduled lifts of Berkeley Bridge. That is a temporary measure. If the Coast Guard will make a decision after December 8th whether to continue that program or not. So in the absence of support from the citizens of Hampton Roads, that program of scheduled lifts is in jeopardy. So the intent would be is mobilize those that are in favor of this, as well as those that oppose it, to let the Coast Guard know what your preferences are for the citizens, so that hopefully it will be extended for a 3-year period after March of 2010.
Thank you very much. Very informative. Any questions or comments?
I just want to remind the CAOs we have a great meeting.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Old new business? Adjourned. Thank you all for your attendance.